byJayantam Vande Guru Paramparam Narayana Samaranam Acharya Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Nam Karta Hari Karta Puja Kancharam Yadyat Karma Karom Tatvahinam Shumbho Javaharam Manojam Natsulayam Jitendrim Chintam Vaishram Vadatmam Mahadevisham Shram Shisham. So, blessed dear aspirants in the field of Yoga and Vedanta, we are blessed to be sitting together and just pondering on various thoughts as they come to us from within by the grace of God and Gurudev. We are discussing about the dialogues from the scriptures, talk about Lord Rama being counseled by his Guru Shishta, and we also took some reference of Upanishad, where the various devas were inflated, with a pride, and they were humbled, and they were given the true knowledge of the Brahman by Brahman himself appearing in form of a Ashram. Today we will just go into one more such dialogue, and that is from the Brihadaranyak. As you all know, before we just get into that, Upanishad, you must have known the meaning by now, correct? So, what is the main subject of Upanishad? BrahmaGyan, knowledge of the Brahman, knowledge of the Atman. And in various ways, employing various methods, employing various prakriyas, it has been taught to the student, so that whatever appeals to him the most, he can receive that and he can follow that. So BrahmaGyana, or unity of the self, you can say, or absolutism, is the pivot of Vedanta, Upanishad philosophy. We know that there are 6 Astik Darshan and 6 Nastik Darshan. And Astik Darshan, we mean the ones who have got faith in Vedas. And in them, Upanishads occupy a very, very important place. We'll say something about what Swami Shivananda Maharaj said in a few words before we go further. As we just said, BrahmaGyana, knowledge of the Brahman, knowledge of the Atman is the main subject. And Upanishad means BrahmaGyana. Upanishad means BrahmaGyana, knowledge of the self. Then what are these texts called as Upanishads? They are the ones which take us to that destination. These are the texts which take us to that destination. So in a secondary sense, or in an auxiliary sense, these scriptures, which appear in the later part of the Vedas, are also called as Upanishad. Upanishad actually means knowledge of the self. Literal meaning is that. And the scriptures which take us to that destination, in a secondary or auxiliary sense, are also called as Upanishad. And here we say that Brahmavit, Brahmaiva Bhavati, they say, that the one Brahmavit Apnoti Param, the one who knows that Brahman becomes Brahman, they say like that. So what does it mean? When you say that I know Brahman, I become Brahman, what does it mean? Brahman is not an act of becoming something. Brahman is not an act of becoming something. It is an act of being. It is just an act of knowing that we are Brahman or the Atman in essence. So as we said yesterday, this is one of the greatest teachings, wisdom teachings which we can think of, even intellectually. We cannot think of anything higher, anything subtler than this particular ideal, even intellectually also. And that is reality. It is not just intellectual truth. So that is the goal. And as I said, various prakriyas are employed, correct? We will not be doing that. I'm just giving a little passing reference to that. Swami Shivananda Maharaj in his book, he is saying that Upanishads employ different kinds of vidyas. And what are vidyas? They are called mystic meditation. They are called mystic meditation. So some of the subtle meditation techniques whereby we can reach closer to our divine destination. They are called Vidyas. In Yoga Shastra also, if you are studying also Yoga Sutra, there are different methods of meditation employed. Even in Vedanta also, Upanishad also, various meditation techniques are prescribed. And they are called as Vidya. To be very honest, I have not studied all these things in detail, but I have got some background idea by the learning, by the hearing the talks of great souls. So I'm just trying to recapitulate, and put the same thing that I have assimilated in very simpler terms. Swami Shivaji Maharaj has said that among different Upanishads, as you all know, 10 Upanishads were Adi Shankara in the Bhashya. They are considered very important. And among them also, Chandogya and Brihadaranyak Upanishad are the ones where these different Vidyas are prescribed. They are very elaborate. So as you know, Adi Shankara also Bhashya, the Gita Press book put together, now 9 meditations is one Upanishad, and Chandogya and Brihadaranyak are separate. They are very elaborate. And the different Vidyas are described there. So, Swamiji has mentioned in his book, that in Chandogya Upanishad, we get different Vidyas like Svata Vidya, Bhuma Vidya, Shandilya Vidya, Dahara Vidya, Vaishwana Vidya, there are many others. And what I am saying all this because we will not certainly be discussing in this course also. But it is even if you know that these are the various things, maybe you can find interest and you can go deeper. The purpose is that, that they just to have orientation and then one can study by one's own self. Just I am telling you what are the Vidyas. And why I am saying this? Because one of the Vidyas we are going to discuss today. So that's Satya Vidya, Bhuma Vidya, Shandilya Vidya, Dahara Vidya, Vaishwana Vidya. It's very, very important, Vaishwana. Correct? Then Pancharni Vidya, Udagit Vidya, Purusha Vidya, Upavarga Vidya, Madhu Vidya, Prana Vidya, Upakosala Vidya, Akshi Vidya, Aditya Vidya, Satyakam Vidya, Akash Vidya, and Swechakeli Vidya. And in many cases, these Vidyas are connected with some kind of incidents also, so that the whole thing becomes very easy for us to comprehend. Today, we are going to take one of the Vidyas from the Brihadaranyak Upanishad. You know any mantra of the Brihadaranyak Upanishad? All of you know. All of you know that mantra. If I tell you, all of you know that mantra. Which is that? Not that Punamala. Asato ma Tamaso ma Mrityur ma. There's a prayer at the beginning of Brihadaranyak. We said many times, sometimes you don't look at the source. But that appears in this particular Upanishad. And here also the different Vidyas are there. So here you have got Maitreyi Vidya, you have got Akshara Vidya, you have got Ataraditya Vidya, Ushashta Vidya, Uddalaka Vidya, Aruni Vidya, Jyotisham and Jyotika Vidya. Like that, various kinds of Vidyas are there. And among them, which one will take today? Which has got very important dialogue. You are aware of that, right? So which is the dialogue? There are many dialogues in this particular Upanishad. But one dialogue which is very popular, very common, that is between YajnavalkyaMaitreyi and Maitreyi. I hope all of you have learned about that. Or not? Not yet. Anyway, even if you have heard it, you can go a little deeper. Even if you have not seen it, it's worthwhile looking at that particular dialogue. So that is the dialogue which we will want to have today. Brihadaranyak Upanishad basically appears in Yajurveda. It's a part of, there are 4 Vedas, so it appears in Yajurveda. And there is Vasajaneyi Brahman. They call the different Brahmans are there. And among that, there is a Vasajaneyi Brahman. This particular Upanishad is there. Now, one Brihad is there, correct? So what does it mean? The word Brahma is coming from the Bru Dhatu also. So what does it mean? It is Vyapaka. Expanse, you can call it in English, correct? EXPN is expanse. So when we just got in unlimited expanse, that's called as a Brihad. Sometimes we know names of various institutions also, they start from Brihad. So Brihad is something which is all encompassing, all covering. So that is Brihadaranyak. And that is Adi Shankara also has said that in terms of caliber, they say that in terms of content, it is very Brihadaranyak. And the Bhashya which Adi Shankara has written is also most elaborate on Brihadaranyak Upanishad as compared to any other Upanishad. Yesterday I just went to Gita Press book and I just procured that book and just read a little more about what that Bhashya says about that particular dialogue. And then one of the disciples, YVFAcourse, atSivananda Mishra, who had a very great dialogue, and ultimately he became the disciple of Adi Shankara. Great Vedantin also. He has written many different texts also. And YVFAcourse says that Brihadaranyak Upanishad is Brihada or vast, not in terms of content, but in terms of meaning also. In terms of the depth of meaning also, Brihadaranyak Upanishad is very Brihad. So that's the beauty of the whole Upanishad. I have not studied in detail the Upanishad, but I thought this little background is helpful to us when we go for the dialogue. And I went to the entire Shankar Bhashya, and I could see that there are 6 adhyaya, what we call chapters, 6 adhyayas there. And in each adhyaya, there are several brahmanas, they call it. The parts are there. So in each chapter, there are different brahmanas. And among them, in adhyaya means chapter number 2, Brahman number 4. Chapter number 2, Brahman number 4. There is a dialogue between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. Everybody knows who is Yajnavalkya? He was a great seer and he was a great sage. Both. He was a great seer and a great sage. And the same dialogue also appears in Adhyaya 4, the chapter 4, Brahman 5. So because of some various branches are there, he explains like that, that also appears like that. This is to have a little background where this particular dialogue appears. Now, how the whole thing starts, that in that particular Adhyaya number 2, Brahman number 4, there is first mantra, that Yajnavalkya. You know that the rishis in the earlier times, they were Buddhists also, and that they were engaged in physical relation only to the extent of procreation. Otherwise, their life would be completely devoted to the study of scriptures and Brahmana like that. So they were highly spiritually evolved persons. But then also they went through 4 different ashramas. So he was a great sage, seer. And one day what happened, that he just called, in those days there might be that so-called polygamy system, he had 2 wives, So he just calls them both, One is Maitreyi, another is Gargi. Gargi is a different subject. The Yajnavalkya and Gargi, they have different dialogue. Very interesting one to guide. As I said, Gargi put 2 questions to Yajnavalkya and he replies them. They are very interesting part. But here it is between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. And Katyayani is also another wife. Now the words which I found very interesting in that particular chapter was, this Maitreyi was Brahmavadini, they called. Brahmavadini, correct? Or they called Shreya Kamini. Good words are there, remember. And very difficult to translate them into English, like, because the limitations. When you say Shreyas and Preyas, how do you translate them? They say pleasant and good. Good is something which is not all that good, that it can be equated to Shreyas, But then in English, if you read, you always call this Preyas and Shreyas, all pleasant and good. So good is something which is not all that good word, or shall we say. But that is the limitation of the language. So here, they call Priya Kamini and Shreya Kamini. So that is Brihadaranyak also, we say about these prayers and Shreyas, What is pleasant to the senses, what is pleasant to the mind, one thing. And Shreyas is something which is elevating, which is just, leading us to the higher purpose of life, What are the 2 words used? Whether you want to say this, that may you attain all progress in prayers, and may you attain all progress in Shreyas. What are the words used? They call Abhyudaya and Nihi Shreyasa. These are the two words, So when you want to wish somebody well, and when you want to say that may you excel, may all things which is present to your body, to your mind, to your senses come to you, that is called as Abhyudaya. That's the word they use commonly, that Abhyudaya Thava applies. But Abhyudaya doesn't actually mean spiritual enlightenment. It only means everything which is well in this secular realm of the world. That's called as Abhyudaya. And Nihi Shreyasa. Nihi means nishchit, with determination, with firmness. That's the meaning of Upanishad also, Who comes here, Ni means with nishchita also, like that. So that is the two things, Priyas and Shreyas. And they are represented by his two wives, Katyayani and Maitreyi. And he says in Mantra 1 of this particular Adhyaya, this particular Brahman, Mantra 1. As you all know, that all the teachings in Upanishads and Vedas are called as mantras. They are not called as slokas, Any other text is there. Even Bhagavad Gita also we call sloka, all the verses. We don't call mantra. Although they are equivalent in terms of their efficacy. But the classical meaning is mantra is from the Upanishads, from the Vedas, and other things are called as slokas. So in the first mantra, Yajnavalkya says, that he has come to the end of his ashrama. The 4 ashramas are the way of leading ideal life. And now that I want to proceed to Sannyasashram. So Sannyasashram is not something which is only confined to the sages or sannyasi which we see here. Right? This is called as a Vividha sannyasi here, that because you want to withdraw from karma yoga, or you are telling your partner is enough in your life, and you want to completely devote yourself in the contemplation of the self and God, then you take to the sannyasa. The Shastra gives permission, the society gives permission, that you don't do any other work, but you just contemplate like that. That's called Vividha sannyasa. But even if we do not take Vividha sannyasa also, we should lead a life in renunciation. So formal sannyasa has a meaning, and Gurudev Swami Shivanji Maharaj always insisted that as far as possible one should take it, because it constantly reminds you of the objective, of the mission of your life. If it is not there, you always tend to forget, take things lightly. That's one part. But even when it is not there, one can live in the spirit of sannyasa. One can live in the spirit of renunciation. And renunciation of what? I-ness and minus. Everything else is covered in this, that is the way of life. And in that, Yajnavalkya was a great seer. And actually, for him there was no need of kind of Vividha sannyas, correct? Because here people take sannyas, here means in every ashrama, that they want to contemplate, they want to study, they want to know what is Brahman. Yajnavalkya is an accomplished, he is an enlightened person. So he doesn't have to take sannyas in that sense, what we call Vividha sannyas. As you know what called Vidvat sannyas, Vidvat sannyas is the one who has realized. And ultimately, he lives in natural renunciation. For him, everything is Atman. There is no non-self. So that is called Vidvat sannyas, which is the goal of life. Either we follow Karma Yoga or we follow Jnana Yoga. The goal is Vidvat sannyas only. And one can go also by Karma Yoga, one can also go by Jnana Yoga. Ultimately, at one point of time, Karma Yoga meets Jnana Yoga. One's antahkarana is purified. So like that, this sannyas dharma is very important in our scripture. And we must know that at particular stage of life, that we should always take that. See, in our ashrama, there was a very great sage called Swami YajnavalkyaMaitreyi. Actually, his Purvashram name was Dr. Sivananda. He was a great servant of mankind. He was a trustee of Himalayan Society in the earlier times and a great devotee. And all service doctors work till late life, 70, 80 years, they keep on working. But they just can't live without seeing a patient like that. So, he was working. At one point of time, Swami Maharaj went to him and said, enough is enough. He didn't say use words, but he said like that, And he said, now I instruct you something that you take sannyasa. So he gave him the name Swami YVFAcourse and his better half, Swami byJayant. So what I mean to say is, we should remember this point also, not just take it as a dialogue. That when we attain that, and not only that stage, and 75 is not the right age, because Swami Maharaj used to say that in the present time, now the human life is extending because of science. But even if we consider 80 as the life, at the age of 60 at least men must feel that I am the right time for sannyasa. It doesn't necessarily mean one has to leave the home, but live in spirit of renunciation. Giving off I-ness and mind. must take the message. Even though he is a realized sage, he prefers to take sannyas. Like a realized person, Lord Rama was there, he had a guru. So guru is important even for Bhagavan also. So likewise, sannyas is also an important stage of life. And here one more thing is mentioned, that he seeks permission of his Dharmapatni or wife, as they call it. That is also a tradition, that she has been so integral part of your life that you are not your own by yourself. And I never say Ardhanarishwar form also, you say the half of the body belongs to the left side belongs to that. So you are one, you are not different. You just cannot think I want to do what I want to do myself. So he seeks consent of Maitreyi also and say that I just want to, in earlier times, sages also used to have some, because the Rishi was there, so that he also had lots of property in terms of cows and animals and whatnot to be there. So that was good, and he said that I just want to distribute like that and among the two wives like that, When I say this, I'm little deviating, but will quickly come back to my point, You do not miss to leave the will of worshipful Swami Chidananda Maharaj. It is one of the rarest or rare wills I have seen in my life, And I don't know, but in the times to come, it may be, people may not know about it today, but it may be rated as one of the highest wills which any human being would have done. And at one point of time, when Chidananda Swami Maharaj, so many people had different ideas. He was worshipped by people like a living god. In Odisha, he was considered as a god, and people used to revere him like that also. But and so many ideas were there, that whatever ashes of the body is there should be 4 places, and 4 places they should create some monuments and things like that. And he just said everybody, that the sage said, I will go to one particular room and come back. And then within few minutes he drafted. I just don't want to go to the detail because that diverted to the subject. But the essence was, what he said was that, for him everything was Guru. There is no separate existence of Swami Chidananda except merging with Swami Shivananda. And that is the message with this particular dialogue has also. That eventually we have to merge in that particular. There is no separate existence at all. Whatever existence that we have is a dependent existence, But then it has to merge into that. So he mentioned everything, how it should all be done, in what form, at what time when he leaves the body, how it should be handled, what kind of mantra should be chanted, how many times it should be chanted, and the nearest river, it should be given. What he meant was, there should not be a trace of a separate existence in the, although he was equivalent. And Swami Shivanji Maharaj has said on several occasions, that by sheer quick fate he has become my Shishya, but is fit to be my Guru. These are his words. But he has a different vision. That Guru is everything for him and complete total submission. I have never seen, really, I am not any bias. I have been very openly listening to lives of so many great saints also. But this kind of extreme Guru Bhakti, where you don't exist yourself separately. Again, I am little deviating, but just, the subject has come to my mind, so I am telling you that that was one particular drama being enacted, on the life of Swami Shivanji Maharaj. That was done by one of the branches in Gujarat. And at that time, the earlier part that Swami Shivanji Maharaj came here, and then, that some little dispensary was opened by Lakshman Jula also. There was some name for that also, some Satya, some name was there. And some sage was there, he saw the great doctor and why, he is treating people, he must be given facility, and that particular Lakshman Jula, some clinic was set up. So at that time, that drama was going on, the stage. And then, then he required that compounder at that time, somebody to serve him like that, So at that time, that on this drama stage, that board was placed, that compounder wanted required like that, And the drama was going on, and within the drama, Chidananda Swami raised his finger, I am ready to volunteer myself as a compound. So although it's a drama going on, he just feels that if my Guru needs me, even in absentia also, I have to create him. And it was not just an emotional outburst, but it was something true reflection of what we call implicit and explicit Guru Bhakti, And that kind of faith is we have in Ishvara. That is also the Svikasriti mantra is also there, correct? If we have that kind of faith in Guru as Ishvara, then the scriptures become revealed to you. So that's the beauty of that particular stage, and that is the greatness of his thing. So in that sense, the sannyasa is very important. as I said. And why I said it? Not because of this particular idea came because of that will. And then he mentioned like this. So no separate existence. Even when he was alive also, at that time also, whatever he will speak, any other subject, he will first say what Guru Swami Maharaj said, and he end up concluding what he said. So this is the kind of devotion which we need for Guru or for Ishvara. And Guru comes to us in form of Ishvara. It's not different. So whenever Ishvara is pleased with you, he presents himself in form of a Guru. So he's not different from Ishvara. But that's what he says. And then Maitreyi was also very clever. Clever in the sense, not the normal sense clever of a god, but very wise. And she realized, that is in mantra number 2, they say, that you are giving me some wealth, it's fine. But even if the whole of the earth, whole of the wealth of the earth comes to me, do I become immortal? Will I become immortal? Like that, Because she was seeking what? Amrutattva. She was seeking Amrutattva. Now, what shall we say here? With the instrument of body, or if we assume ourselves as a body, we can never be immortal. If the body is definitely bound to decay and die. So, with the instrument or means of the body, we can never become immortal. If we think ourselves, identify with the mind, we'll never become eternally happy. Always there is going to be, pain and places that. At the level of mind, if we attune ourselves, we'll never be eternally happy. And at the level of intellect, we will never be enlightened in the spirit. So that is how we need to transcend all these three levels, correct? And here she says, we will give me immortality. So she was seeking Amrita Tattva. And why the person is seeking Amrita Tattva? Not only she was seeking, everybody is seeking, but we are seeking in different forms. Supposing you are there in one particular office or one particular place, you always want that you should remain in that position, people should respect you. If you are in the family, even if you grow 70, 80 also, you think people should respect me and I should always be considered. And you do some kind of donation, some kind of takti is there, that people remember you after your death. So this is the wish for man to become immortal. Why is it like that? Because in essence we are atSivananda. And that is why it is reflected in this form, that you want to remain forever. So the immortality, everybody wants to live, even in physical body also. Why everybody wants to live long? Why everybody wants to live for 100 years? That is mainly because Sata, absolute existence, is a part of my being. And that is what is reflected in terms of this desire, to live long like that. So she wanted that immortality has to come to me. So when you say this clear, thou art atSivananda, so absolute existence, absolute consciousness, absolute bliss is our nature. And that is what gets reflected in our desire to live long, to know everything. Nobody wants to remain ignorant, Supposing something is there and we are traveling in the train and somebody is reading newspaper, even if we are seeing from a distance, we will try to see something, whatever we can read, we will try to read. For any subject, nobody likes to be ignorant. Nobody wants to be unhappy. Because bliss is our nature. YajnavalkyaMaitreyi Maharaj is in one of his books, he writes in that 100 book, he says, how can sorrow exist? How can there be sorrow when bliss alone exists? That's what he asks. And our experience is quite different, Then we always feel sorrow and we are seeking bliss. And he's putting other ground, that how can there be sorrow when bliss alone exists? And we sometimes feel, how to seek bliss when you are always suffering from sorrow? This is a tragedy of the being, and that's all the products of ignorance. So here he says, I want immortality. So will it come to me? And YajnavalkyaMaitreyi says that even if the whole, wealth is there, then you can lead a life like a rich man, wealthy man, the way they live. That kind of lifestyle will come to you, but immortality cannot come by possessing any amount of wealth. And we know a number of instances in history also, people have said this, And then in mantra 3, that Maitreyi was a wise consort. She says, Ye naham namritasyam kimahim ten kuryam. So if that is not going to give me immortality, what worth that wealth has got for me? And she knew that he is an enlightened, she is not just this consort of life. And she says, Yadeva Bhagavan Veda Tadeva Me Praviti. If you know, by knowing what, I can become immortal? Please tell me that. I want to know that. My health is not something I'm very much concerned. That may have some limited role in life. That they will get dharma, the kama, moksha. It has its own place. But we need to transcend it beyond this particular point, because they are not the absolute ends of life. They are the relative ends of life. And then Yajnavalkya says, to her consort that you have been very dear to me all throughout my life, and what you are saying has pleased me even more. I am more happier by what you are saying right now. And because she wanted Amrutatva, the means is Atma-jnana. Only by Atma, which is the essence of the Upanishad. Only if that knowledge of the self comes, only that will make you immortal. Everything else cannot do that. So he says that Atma-jnana is something which, and I will tell you, you just listen to it with meaning. You just listen to it with meaning. And then you concentrate, you meditate on that. That's what he says. And then the very important mantra which is there, which is known to everybody also, correct? So in the whole mantra is not there, but in this book, Swami Shivaji Maharaj has condensed it. And only the later part of the mantra he puts it, not the whole mantra is there. And he says, what does he say? Nava are sarvasya kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Nava are sarvasya kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Atmastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. This is the key message of the whole dialogue. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. What does it mean? Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Means, for the sake of self, for the sake of Atma, everything is dear to me. And then, in the previous part, which is not there in this particular mantra, Swamiji says, it is explained that a husband is not dear to his wife for the sake of husband, but for the sake of the self, for the sake of one's own self. What he says, for the sake of self means one's own self, for one's own self. Stree or the wife is not dear to husband for the sake of wife, but for his own sake, अपने लिए, प्रयोजन के लिए. The son is not dear for the sake of son, but son is dear for the sake of one's own self. Wealth is not dear. We get so much of wealth, but for the sake of wealth we are not loving it. We are loving it because if it is dear to myself, we understand what the meaning of that word is, correct? But for the sake of myself, everything is dear, not for the individual's sake. Likewise, loka, different words, loka and whatever they say, some people aspire that, At least I don't think we all aspire that, but some people wish that they should go to heaven and enjoy like that, whatever. So lokas are dear to them, not for the sake of their lokas, but for the sake of their own self. Likewise, even if I call myself Brahman, Kshatriya like that, so it is not because I love Brahman, I love Kshatriya, but because I love myself like that. Devatas also like the different gods. Why gods are dear to always seek some favor from them. We don't pray any god or any devatas just because they are dear to us. If you analyze that, that's very true introspection, like all devatas we worship, always we end up with some little personal prayer. Many things happen to me like that. It hardly happens that our worship ends without making any personal offer. Either in words, even if you don't put in words, we really think like that. So all these are dear to us for the sake of self, for the sake of Atma. What does it mean actually? What would you say? Would like to say? I always thought differently on the whole subject like that. What does it mean? And when I say that somebody is dear to me, not for that sake, but for the sake of my own self, what does it mean actually? Yes, 1 or 2% generally.
Or wealth is all about facilities.
When you say it is dear for the sake of self, what does it mean?
Oneness. It's oneness.
It's oneness, you say. Okay.
The fulfillment of that.
Fulfillment of?
From whatever you are seeking.
Whatever you are seeking.
So
Okay.
whether wealth or...
Yeah, well, okay.
The fear is minimized a little and the confidence goes on.
So see, one practical meaning or one ordinary meaning can be this. I was thinking like this all these days, that because so and so person helps me getting what I want. That is why it is there. That is why this person is there to me. That whatever I want in my life, or whatever I consider as goal, destiny of my life, that is served through the association of that particular person. So that person is here. So in other words, instrument. That's well, that if I want to go somewhere, if I want to go to foreign travel, or if I want to do anything like that, then I need some wealth. So wealth is here to me, not because of wealth, but because it helps me taking to abroad like that. So meaning what we have, right? But that's not the whole meaning here. That's not the whole meaning here. Apparently it is true. Vyavaharic group say that's fine, that whatever you have visions, whatever desire that we have, it is something, that it fulfills, and that is why it is here. But the actual meaning will be what? The actual meaning will be that, that the true happiness will come only when we are attuned with ourselves. And when you say that atSivananda, right? So Sat is eternal existence, and as I said, she wants immortality, so that I have to exist forever. All other existence is dependent existence. Right? Everything has come from Brahman, but all is dependent existence. And then consciousness, absolute consciousness. Our consciousness is something which is confined to some particular object, some particular thing. But absolute consciousness and absolute bliss. So absolute bliss without any cause. See, our bliss is dependent upon something. Because something comes to me, I am happy. Because I get something happy. So depending is objective. Depends upon some objective. But by the very subjective I am the bliss. Then I don't need any object. I don't need any condition to become blissful, to become happy. Like that, So it is only when one abides in one Atman, or one is able to identify and abide in oneself, only then that bliss can come. And another way around they say that everything that has come here is again come from that Brahman only. So there is no separate existence actually. That's a little deeper meaning later on they explain here. But just to conclude, I am saying it here like that, that from the point of view of a Jnani, from the point of view of a Jnani, there is no anatma, they say like that. In 14th mantra they explain like that. Actually after the whole meaning it is said like that, that being oneself and non-self, atma and anatma, that is as long as we are under the shadow of Abhinaya. We are in the shadow of ignorance. That this self and non-self is there. Atma and Anatma is there. And that will remain until we attain that liberation, that state of realization. But for a Jnani they say, who is Brahmavita they call, he abides in the self. For him there is no existence other than Atman. Nehan anasikincha. That is what they say in Upanishad also. Everything else doesn't exist. All is mere appearance. So ultimate bliss will come only when one is able to abide in that self. Otherwise, everything else will give relative happiness. And that relative happiness in that sense, gives us lead to that absolute happiness. That we are getting some happiness in the sleep. So it gives you an idea as to how good that samadhi avastha will be. So here Yajnavalkya says that Nava are sarvasya kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati, atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Everything is because it takes me towards Atman, and in other words you can say everything is manifestation of Atman. Everything is manifestation of Atman. The other thing has the capacity to give you bliss, to give happiness, because it is a manifestation of Atman. Otherwise no. So even if you see in the world says that it is made up of Sat, Chit, Ananda and Nama and Rupa. Sat, Chit, Ananda, Nama and Rupa. So in every object of the world, in every being of the world, there is Sat, existence, there is Chit, there is consciousness, and there is bliss, Ananda. Even a human excreta can be a kind of a loving thing for some kind of microbes. So nothing is worthless. So why everything can be a source of happiness in a relative sense? That is because there is Satchit Ananda also. And there is a Nama Rupa also. So for a Jnani or for those people who are still, most of us who are still in ignorance, you say that in the whole world you see Sat, Chit and Ananda, and Nama Rupa is to be transcended. Nama Rupa is to be, in the Nama Rupa you see Satchidananda. Transcendence means in all the names and forms you see Satchidananda. And for a Jnani, Nama Rupa is not there. For a Jnani, Nama Rupa is not there. All the names and forms are Atman only. So this basic difference difference between the person who is ignorant and the person who is enlightened. But ignorant person, you will say that in all the names and forms, let us serve within all the names and forms. You will say, that is why we say, why Swami says like that? Because we see Satta and name and rules. So let us serve within all the names and forms. So in all the names and forms, we see Satchidananda. And for a Jnani, names and forms do not exist, they are melt. So anything that has come from the Atman ultimately melts in Atman, and in present form also it is Atman. So Yajnavalkya says that Atmanastu Kamaya Sarvam Priyam Bhavati. Then what is this? Atma Vahe Drashtavya, Shrutavya, Mantavya, Nididhyasitavya. That is why it is his Atman which is to be seen. It is his Atman which is to be heard. It is his Atman which is to be reflected upon. And it is the Atman which is to be meditated upon. So in Jnana Marga, when you call Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana. So here what Yajnavalkya says, that you hear about the Atma. Reflect, Manana means reflect about that. And when you do reflect, you need logic. But when you hear, you don't need logic. If you are hearing today, if you apply logic, simultaneously the message will go away. So logic is important, but that's the time of reflection, not at the time of listening. When you are listening to your word, otherwise your logic means go. Then there will be your idea. So hearing has to be absolute, with full faith. Thought will come when it comes to reflection. And then Nididhyasana is meditation. So these all things are to be done, and Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana, if they are done together, sometimes for highly evolved person, only Shravana also can lead to liberation. But actually in this sequence, that Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana, this hearing, reflection and contemplation, that can lead to that revelation of that particular self. And what do we do actually? Do we do that? If we analyze, that do we really do this? Do we think about Atman? Most of the times, intellect that God has given to us, we employ in thinking, analyzing about non-self. We don't think about that. So, as a human being, we don't do this. But that is what they say, Yajnavalkya uses. And then what he further says, Atmano va are darshanena, shravanena, matya, vijnanenam, sarvam viditam. So if you do this, Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana, then everything becomes known to you. Now this is another strange thing. How can you say that even if you know the self, how can everything be known? So supposing we say, for illustration, that Gurudev was self-realized person. Does it mean that he would have known everything? He would have known what surgeon does, he would have known what advocate does. Does it mean that? When scripture says if you know the Atman, everything is known. So what does it mean? Actually, how do they say like this, that if you know the Atman, everything is known. So, there are two things. One is Samanya Jnana and one is Vishesha Jnana. So Samanya Jnana is about that Satchidananda Swarupa of a person. And Vishesha Jnana is about the names and forms, correct? So for a self-realized person, it doesn't mean that he will know art, he will know philosophy, he will know aeronautics and everything. That's not the meaning. But actual meaning, why do they say that you will know everything? Is because here they want to say that there is nothing other than self. If there was something other than self, if there was something other than Atman, then yes, he will not have known. So whatever we see is only appearance. Whatever we see is only appearance. It is about names and forms and some peculiar characters, which will not be known. Correct? But in essence, everything is Atman. And there are other verses also which explain the same thing. That the Brahman word, the Kshatriya word, and all these words, and this God, these beings, everything here is what the soul. So, for a Jnani, everything is Brahman, everything is Atman. And for a person who has not attained that stage, what will happen? For him, this Karana, they call instruments, they are there, mind, body, separate existence is there. So Karana is there, so Kriya is there, action is there. And action is there, so Karma is there. So for a person who is not enlightened or realized, there is that Karana, Karma and Karma Phala. And we always engage in this kind of dualities. But for a person who is realized, this Karma is also Atma. Brahma 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 Brahmana Brahma Yudhana Brahma Karma Samajana Bhagavad Gita, when they say this, there is no Karana, there is no instrument, there is no mind. A Bhakta also says, sometimes mind is taken away by Lord, I have no mind. In Bhagavad also mentions that. When there is no Karana, how there is Karma and how there is Karma Phala. So the state is to transcend to reach that particular state. And in Upanishads and scriptures they show, there are two ways you can can do this, you know. First thing is, everything is aham. First thing, everything is aham. Whatever I see is object, it is all sarvam khalidam Brahman. So Brahman exists everywhere. Names and forms are separated. But we must have the conviction, you know, that everything is manifestation of Brahman. So everything is not separate from Brahman. It has existence, but it has got a dependent existence. Why we say it doesn't exist? It cannot exist without the help of Atman. It cannot exist on its own. That is why we say, then we say Sarvam Khaludam Brahma. So first we should have this feeling that Bhakta also can do karma yoga also. And second message is doctrine of obligation. Not this, not this, not this. So what is to be negated? Nam and Rupa. And the individuals that you consider this body, this mind, they are all agents, useful tools, but they are not the ultimate truths. They will take me up to a particular point beyond which I have to transcend. That's the meaning. So one is see everything as aham. Second thing, see everything as idam. The two ways we can see. We see Parabrahman as self. And second thing is we negate whatever is there, whatever is sublated, whatever remains there. So this was the message and this was the method which Yajnavalkya gave. And that also for creating Vairagya. When he gave example for the son, wife, why? Because we have an attachment to this. So to create Vairagya from that, these instances are there. And ultimately, identification and abidance in self is the message, which is what gives immortality, which is what gives absolute consciousness, absolute bliss. May this knowledge of self, what Maharshi gave, also comes to us in some way as a part of our life. May we get his blessings. That is our humble prayers to our sage attention.